$1 million hidden in just 3 quarters. One sold for $513,000, another for $290 AL, and a third for $189,000. The shocking part? They looked exactly like ordinary Washington quarters that millions of Americans still have today. Before you spend another quarter, watch this documentary. The story begins the way many remarkable discoveries do, not in a museum, not at an auction house, and not inside a vault, but in a quiet room where an old coin album sat untouched for years. Dust covered its worn cover. The pages inside held dozens of familiar coins that looked different from the change millions of Americans had carried in their pockets. Yet as one collector slowly turned those pages, something caused him to stop. One quarter looked ordinary at first glance, but its unusually pristine appearance hinted that it had survived a journey unlike the others. Decades later, that seemingly common coin would become one of the most admired examples known to collectors, eventually reaching a value of $189,000. The coin was a Liberty Washington quarter, dollar struck in 1998 at the Philadelphia Mint, identified by its P Mint mark. To most Americans in 1998, it was simply another quarter entering circulation. It bought snacks from vending machines, disappeared into cash registers, and rattled inside pockets and purses across the country. Few people imagined that certain examples would one day become treasured artifacts, studied under magnification, and pursued by serious collectors. To understand why this coin matters, it helps to step back into America during 1998. The nation stood at the edge of a new millennium. The internet was rapidly expanding into everyday life. Economic confidence was high. Millions of Americans were preparing for a future that seemed filled with technological possibility. While headlines focused on innovation and change, the United States Mint continued one of its oldest responsibilities, producing the coins that connected daily commerce from coast to coast. Philadelphia played a special role in that mission. As America's first federal minting facility, the Philadelphia Mint carried a legacy reaching back to the earliest years of the Republic. By 1998, modern machinery had replaced the hand-operated equipment of earlier generations, but the purpose remained the same. Every coin struck there represented continuity between America's past and present. The small P Mint mark on this quarter quietly connected it to that long tradition. The design itself carried a story stretching far beyond 1998. The portrait of George Washington originated from the work of sculptor John Flanagan, whose vision first appeared on the quarter in 1932. Flanagan based his depiction on a bust created by the French sculptor Jean-Antoine Houdon, who had observed Washington in person during the 18th century. Every 1998 quarter, therefore, carried an artistic link not only to American history, but also to an artist who had witnessed the nation's first president with his own eyes. Collectors often find themselves captivated by details most people never notice. Under magnification, the Washington quarter reveals careful craftsmanship in the lettering, the profile, the eagle on the reverse, and the countless tiny design elements that must survive. The striking process. What appears simple from across a room becomes a landscape of textures, contours, and minute features when viewed closely. For many collectors, discovering those hidden details feels like uncovering a secret layer of history. The fascination deepens when condition enters the conversation. Most 1998 quarters entered circulation immediately, collecting scratches, contact marks, and wear from everyday use. A coin that survives without those imperfections becomes increasingly difficult to find as years pass. This reality creates one of the most important lessons in coin collecting. Rarity is not always about low production numbers. Sometimes it is about survival. Imagine opening an inherited collection and finding a quarter that appears untouched by time. Its surfaces still shimmer with original mint luster. The design remains sharp and fully defined. The coin seems frozen in the moment it left the presses of the Philadelphia Mint. For collectors, such discoveries create an emotional connection that extends beyond monetary value. Holding that coin feels like holding a preserved moment from another era. Some enthusiasts search through rolls from banks hoping to uncover overlooked treasures. Others spend weekends examining old albums assembled by parents or grandparents. The excitement comes not from certainty but from possibility. Every ordinary-looking quarter carries the potential to tell an unexpected story. most will remain common examples. But occasionally one emerges with exceptional preservation, unusual characteristics, or qualities that separate it from millions of others. Professional grading transformed the way collectors evaluate coins like the 1998 P. Washington quarter. Experts examined strike quality, luster, surface preservation, and overall eye appeal. The difference between a typical circulated coin and an elite example can be astonishing. Tiny imperfections invisible to casual observers may determine whether a coin remains modestly collectible or becomes a centerpiece of an advanced collection. As years passed, demand for the finest surviving examples continued to grow. Collectors seeking the best of the best competed for coins displaying extraordinary preservation. Auction houses became stages where history, rarity, and condition converged. The most exceptional 1998 P. Washington quarter eventually achieved a remarkable milestone, selling for an astounding $189,000. That figure was not simply a reflection of metal content or face value. It represented decades of survival, expert authentication, elite condition, historical significance, and the passion of collectors determined to preserve a small piece of American heritage. What makes this story memorable is not the number itself. It is the realization that an object worth only 25 cents was quietly traveling through history while the world changed around it. It witnessed the closing years of the 20th century, survived the transition into a new millennium, and eventually found recognition among those who understood its significance. The Liberty Washington quarter dollar of 1998 reminds us that history does not always announce itself with grand monuments or famous documents. Sometimes it hides in the most familiar objects imaginable. A coin passed from hand to hand can become a witness to generations, a connection between past and present, and a reminder that extraordinary stories often live inside ordinary things. And as our journey continues to the next coin, another chapter waits to reveal how a simple piece of American currency became something far greater than the value stamped upon its surface. The investigation began with a simple comparison. A collector sorting through several folders of inherited quarters noticed that one coin seemed slightly different from the rest. It wasn't brighter. It wasn't damaged. Nothing about it immediately demanded attention. Yet when placed beside other quarters from the same era, something about its preservation stood out. The coin appeared to have escaped the decades more gracefully than its companions. At the time, it was just another entry in a notebook. Years later, that small observation would prove far more important than anyone expected. The coin under examination was a Liberty Washington quarter dollar struck in Denver in 1994, identified by the D Mint mark. Millions were produced during a year when few Americans gave much thought to the quarters moving through their hands every day. Collectors saved some, spent others, and stored countless examples away in albums. The question that slowly emerged was not whether the coin was rare in a traditional sense, but why a handful of surviving examples seemed so much more desirable than the rest. The first clue pointed directly toward the Denver Mint itself. Located at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, the facility had become one of the nation's most productive coin manufacturers. The D Mint mark served as a small but significant identifier, allowing collectors to trace a coin's birthplace. To a casual observer, that single letter might seem insignificant. To numismatists, it immediately narrows the investigation and provides context for how a coin entered circulation. Looking back at America in 1994 reveals another layer of the story. The country was experiencing a period of technological growth and economic transition. Personal computers were becoming increasingly common in homes and workplaces. Major cultural and political events dominated headlines. Yet while the nation focused on change, the quarter remained one of the most familiar pieces of American currency. It moved quietly through grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, and vending machines, connecting millions of daily transactions. That raises an interesting question. Why did collectors continue paying attention to a design that had already been part of American life for decades? The answer begins with the portrait on the obverse. Sculptor John Flanagan's depiction of George Washington had first appeared in 1932, inspired by the celebrated bust created by Jean-Antoine Houdon. The design carried a sense of permanence that few American coin portraits have achieved. By 1994, generations of Americans had grown up recognizing that profile instantly. The reverse side offered another piece of evidence. The heraldic eagle displayed strength, balance, and national symbolism. Although Americans saw the design countless times, collectors often examine it with remarkable attention. The feathers, lettering, and fine details reveal how effectively a coin was struck. Even subtle differences in sharpness can provide valuable clues about quality and preservation. As collectors studied 1994 D quarters, a pattern emerged. Most examples displayed the expected signs of circulation. Contact marks, minor scratches, and reduced luster were common. These characteristics were not unusual. They simply reflected the realities of daily commerce. The investigation therefore shifted toward a different question. How many examples survived in truly exceptional condition? The answer became clearer through grading. Professional grading services began documenting coins that retained extraordinary surface quality and original mint brilliance. Under magnification, specialists evaluated every detail. Tiny marks that most people would never notice suddenly mattered. A coin's grade became a record of how successfully it had survived years of handling, storage, and environmental exposure. This led collectors into familiar but exciting territory. Bankroll hunters searched unopened rolls. Families reopened albums assembled decades earlier. Estate collections produced forgotten examples tucked away in envelopes and boxes. The thrill came from comparison. 2 quarters struck in the same year at the same mint could appear remarkably different after decades of separate journeys. One might show extensive wear. Another might appear almost untouched. Another clue emerged from collector behavior itself. Serious numismatists were no longer searching only for rare dates. They increasingly pursued condition rarity. This distinction changed how coins like the 1994 D Washington quarter were viewed. While many examples existed, very few achieved the highest standards demanded by elite collectors. The investigation was no longer about production numbers. It had become an examination of survival. Auction records began reflecting this shift. Specialists noticed increasing interest whenever unusually well-preserved examples appeared for sale. Collectors competing for top quality. Specimens understood that replacing such coins could be difficult. Demand gradually concentrated around the finest certified examples, transforming what many considered an ordinary quarter into a legitimate target for advanced collections. The importance of authentication also became impossible to ignore. Before a coin could earn serious recognition, experts needed confidence in its originality. Natural luster, untouched surfaces, and accurate grading all contributed to credibility. Without those factors, extraordinary auction results would never occur. Every detail had to support the conclusion that the coin represented one of the best surviving examples known. Eventually, the evidence converged. Collectors, grading specialists, and auction professionals reached the same realization. The finest known 1994 D Liberty Washington quarter dollar represented a level of preservation rarely encountered for a circulating coin of its era. What began as an everyday 25-cent piece had become a benchmark example within its category. When that realization reached the marketplace, the result was remarkable. The highest known example achieved a value of approximately $298,000. The figure reflected far more than face value. It represented condition, authenticity, historical continuity, collector demand, and decades of survival against the odds. The coin had not become important because it was spent. It became important because one extraordinary specimen endured with exceptional quality while countless others accumulated. The marks of time. In the end, the investigation revealed something larger than a single coin. The 1994 D Washington quarter demonstrates how history often leaves clues in plain sight. A small letter beneath a portrait, a carefully preserved surface, and a forgotten place in an old collection can eventually tell a story that reaches far beyond money. As impressive as this chapter has been, the final coin in our documentary carries an even stronger connection to the generations who saved, spent, and unknowingly preserved pieces of America's past. That story awaits in the next chapter of our journey. Imagine holding a small piece of metal that has quietly traveled through decades of American life. It sat in cash registers, rested in dresser drawers, crossed countless countertops, and passed through hands that never stopped to consider its journey. While families grew, cities changed, and a new generation inherited the future. This coin continued moving through everyday life almost unnoticed. Yet among collectors, one remarkable example of this humble quarter would eventually earn a place of extraordinary respect. That coin was the Liberty Washington $quarter struck in Philadelphia. In 1984, identified by the P Mint mark, at first glance, there is nothing dramatic about it. It carries the same familiar appearance that Americans had recognized for generations. But that familiarity is precisely what gives the coin its power. It represents a period of history not through grand events alone, but through ordinary daily experiences shared by millions of people. America in 1984 was a nation looking forward. Personal computers were beginning to enter homes and offices. New technologies were reshaping communication. Popular culture reflected confidence, ambition, and rapid change. Yet despite these transformations, some symbols remained constant. The Washington quarter was one of them. Whether someone lived in a busy city or a small rural community, the coin served the same purpose, quietly connecting people through commerce and everyday routines. For collectors, that connection to ordinary life is often more meaningful than rarity itself. Coins preserve moments that written records sometimes overlook. A newspaper may document major events, but a coin preserves the reality of daily existence. The 1984 quarter reminds us what Americans carried in their pockets, used at local stores, and handled without a second thought during a specific chapter of the nation's story. Its design deepens that historical connection. The portrait of George Washington originated from the work of sculptor John Flanagan, whose interpretation first appeared on the quarter in 1932, inspired by the celebrated likeness created by Jean-Antoine Houdon. The portrait conveys dignity and stability. Decades after its introduction, the image remained one of the most recognizable pieces of artwork in American life. Every strike of the dies carried that legacy forward. The reverse side tells a complementary story. The eagle, wings spread with confidence, represents strength and endurance. It is not an elaborate design, yet its simplicity gives it lasting appeal. Collectors often spend time studying these familiar details because they reveal the quality of a coin's strike and preservation. What seems ordinary from a distance becomes surprisingly intricate. When examined closely, many collectors first encounter coins like this through family history, an old album inherited from a grandparent, a small box discovered while organizing a closet, a collection assembled decades earlier and carefully stored away. In those moments, the coin becomes more than an object. It becomes evidence of a connection between generations. The person examining it today may be separated by years from the individual who originally saved it. Yet both are linked through the same piece of history. That emotional connection helps explain why collectors devote so much effort to preservation. They are not simply protecting metal, they are safeguarding stories. The Philadelphia Mint mark on a 1984 quarter identifies where the coin was produced, but its condition reveals how it survived. Every scratch, every mark, and every untouched surface becomes part of the record. Over time, specialists began paying closer attention to the finest surviving examples of this issue. Most quarters fulfilled their intended purpose and entered circulation immediately. They experienced wear, contact marks, and the countless effects of daily use. A small number, however, escaped that fate. Preserved with exceptional care, they retained original, mint luster, and remarkable visual appeal long after their contemporaries had aged. Professional grading introduced another layer of appreciation. Experts evaluated strike quality, surface preservation, eye appeal, and overall condition. These assessments helped distinguish exceptional examples from ordinary survivors. The difference could be subtle to the casual observer, yet profoundly important within the numismatic community. As the years passed, collectors increasingly recognized that the finest known examples represented something special. Not because they were different in design, but because they preserved the design so completely. Auction specialists, grading experts, and advanced collectors all reached a similar conclusion. Certain examples of the 1984 P. Washington quarter stood among the most impressive survivors of their generation. When one extraordinary specimen eventually appeared before the collecting community, the response reflected decades of appreciation for preservation and authenticity. The coin achieved a remarkable value of $513,000. That number was not created by face value, metal content, or speculation alone. It emerged from a combination of exceptional condition, trusted authentication, historical continuity, collector demand, and the simple reality that some pieces of history survive more completely than others. Yet the true significance of this quarter cannot be measured in dollars. Its importance lies in what it represents. Throughout this journey, we have explored coins that inspired curiosity, rewarded investigation, and revealed hidden layers of history. This final coin reminds us why those discoveries matter. Every preserved coin is a small witness to its time. It carries evidence of the people who made it, used it, saved it, and ultimately protected it. History often survives in unexpected places. It may rest inside an old album, wait quietly in a forgotten collection, or remain hidden among ordinary coins that most people overlook. The Liberty Washington $quarter of 1984 proves that even the most familiar objects can carry extraordinary stories. So the next time you encounter an old coin, pause for a moment and look a little closer. You may not simply be holding currency. You may be holding a surviving fragment of history, still waiting to share its story with a new generation of curious eyes.